She reached the executive suite on time, badge in hand, breath steady, and the glass doors already humming with low conversation. A woman in a tailored blazer stepped forward before she could touch the handle. The manager's smile was thin and practiced, the kind that announces authority long before any words do. "You're not on the list," she said, loud enough for the foyer to hear. The sentence landed like a door closing. Ariel Knox paused, not because she didn't belong, but because the door was physically between her and the room where $300 million were meant to be discussed. Her credentials, an ornate card and a corporate pass on her phone, were offered and then brushed aside, as if they were props. The manager made no secret of the performance, a public exclusion designed to show everyone who ran the room. Executives in the glass-walled conference room glanced over, phones lifted, the projector hummed. The first humiliation had begun. If you've seen this kind of arrogance, hit like and share. The escalation was methodical, almost ritualistic. First, the list. The manager repeated it as if repetition turned dismissal into fact. "You're not on the list," she said again, louder, scanning the names in a leather binder as if that ink were law. Second, the credentials were dismissed. Ariel's phone, glowing with a company pass, was held out and ignored. The manager's hand waved the device away, an invisible broom sweeping Ariel out of the present. Third, the label. The manager folded her arms and used a word that landed as a judgment in the room, entitled, casting Ariel as an interloper, someone whose presence must be explained away. Behind the glass, a couple of executives shifted in their seats, because it is easier to take a manager's word than to look closely at what they are protecting. Fourth, the threat. Security was summoned with a crisp call. Minutes, the manager said, were being wasted. "We can remove you," she offered, as both protocol and performance. The watch on one executive's wrist tapped once. Time itself seemed to agree. Fifth, the movement of bodies. Two security guards approached, practical and hesitant, uncertain whether the event they had been called to enforce would require force. Ariel did not shout, she did not storm. She kept her eyes steady on the manager, on the glass wall behind her, on the faces in the room whose silence felt like consent. People were recording. The room smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet. The projector's blue light washed across a chart on the far wall. The manager's smile widened as the theater of exclusion reached its peak. But theater depends on an audience that never checks the script. A junior assistant, a figure half hidden near the elevator, stepped forward with a kind of small urgency. He whispered something to a colleague, a soft motion of fingers across a phone, the kind of movement that often goes unnoticed, until it doesn't. A single, unobtrusive ping traveled through the glass like a small missile. Phones vibrated, a notification chimed in the corridor, and then in ears across the room. The assistant's tablet lit up with an authorization header. Primary authorization received. Ariel, who had been holding her device calmly at chest level, turned it outward so it could be seen. The screen showed the company's secure portal with her name and a highlighted line, Authorized Decision Maker, $300 million. The digits sat there with an odd, quiet insistence. The ping was small, the implication enormous. The CEO, who had been poised inside the room with his fingers steepled, looked up from his tablet, the way someone tilts their head when a familiar voice calls their name. Recognition, immediate and unmistakable, crossed his features. It happened in seconds. The projector stuttered and then redirected. Laptops in the conference room flicked as remote access routed documents to Ariel's profile. Inside, screens that had been showing an agenda switched to a secure document labeled with a project name and a line that every person in that glass box understood. Controls Capital, 300M. The manager's thin smile dissolved, not with rage, but with sudden, exposed panic. Her tablet began to lock, the icons dimming, access revoked, as if the room itself had decided to protect the account of the person she had tried to humiliate. There was no need for a speech. Authority reasserted itself in the most factual of forms. A digital stamp, a CEO's nod, a server acknowledging a chain of command. The manager reached for words to regain a grip on her performance, but the floor had shifted beneath her. Eyes that had been following her lead now darted to Ariel. Voices in the room murmured. Someone on the lobby level, one of the reporters who'd been waiting near the elevators, raised a camera. The optics changed. The CEO stood. He did not shout. He did not gloat. He said plainly that the meeting would be postponed pending a review of conduct, and he asked for privacy while they reorganized. Security, who had been ready to remove Ariel, shifted gears. The manager, once the one directing bodies and minutes, was the one being guided towards the doors. Her posture, previously practiced for control, shrank slightly under the scrutiny of colleagues and of phones that would carry an image of this moment beyond the building. She walked out with her hands near her briefcase, escorted by guards and watched by 100 small lenses. Ariel did not demand that the meeting be canceled. She did not raise her voice. She clipped her phone to her bag and turned to leave, measured and composed.
At the threshold, where the fluorescent light gave way to the softer tones of the hall, she paused and faced the room, not to gloat, but to state what had already been made true by the facts. "Access," she said, her voice calm and clear, "is earned by respect." Those words landed differently than a clapback.
They were less an accusation than a principle, spoken by someone whose authority did not need to be performed to exist. Reporters on the sidewalk below had already begun to speak into microphones, their feeds hungry for the reversal, for the image of someone who had been excluded and then revealed to control the very thing the meeting was supposed to decide. The footage would travel, trimmed and reshared, but the moment itself, Ariel's stillness against the manager's earlier performance, was complete and singular. The aftermath was immediate in its optics and quiet in policy. The meeting did not resume that afternoon. Executives filed out, some with embarrassed glances, others with distracted looks towards screens that still pulsed with the faint ghost of the $300 million header. Security returned to their posts. The manager left the building under escort. Words about next steps, about conduct reviews, moved through the building with the polite speed of people who preferred not to speak loudly about corporate mistakes. Ariel rode the elevator dab alarm. The doors slid closed and glass reflected the conference room behind her, the room where power had been performed and then corrected. She looked at her hands for a moment, at the phone tucked against her chest, at the badge that had been ignored. Then she set her face forward and walked out into the city, where reporters clustered on the sidewalk, where a handful of people paused to ask shorthand questions, where the day continued but had been quietly altered. There is a lesson in moments like this that does not fit neatly into a headline. Authority is not the volume of your voice or the sharpness of your suit. It is the substance behind the claim. Respect creates access. Contempt erodes it. A manager can marshal protocol, can move guards, can make lists. But when the ledger of who controls resources is opened, facts do the speaking. The manager's performance was exposed not by spectacle, but by a simple, irreversible record, the authorization in Ariel's name, and the $300 million figure that obliged the room to recognize her. This is not a story of revenge. It is a story of dignity restored, briefly, in a lobby of glass and light, and of the cost of assuming power without humility. The optics mattered because our modern rooms record themselves, and because the faces of those who watch often decide quickly where the sympathy falls. Ariel walked away with what she had before the moment began, her composure, her role, and the quiet knowledge that she had been rightfully recognized. The manager walked out with the lesson pressed into the day like an aftertaste. If this moment speaks to you, tell us where you watched from and give one word that captures your reaction. Subscribe to see more stories where dignity is preserved and where the small, steady acts of authority meet the tests they must pass.